Welcome back to our coverage of the shocking case of the killer nurse Lucy Letby. This was a complex Crown Court trial following a long police investigation. The jurors had to sit through harrowing evidence for 10 months before reaching guilty verdicts over the murders of 7 babies. The jury, though, couldn't reach verdicts on 6 charges of attempted murder against Letby. So now the CPS has asked the judge for 28 days to consider whether Letby should face another trial on those charges. To discuss this extraordinary trial, I'm joined now by the criminal defence barrister, Joseph Kotrie-Monson, and the criminal lawyer, Paul Gilbert. Thank you both for joining me. Paul, just your initial gut reaction on the fact that for some families, for some parents, they will have justice, but for others, they don't. What is the process now to determine whether Lucy will face another trial?
Well, that is for the CPS to look at the evidence in relation to the other charges and to determine whether in relation to that evidence there is sufficient to justify a further trial. One of the considerations is going to be whether, given the convictions that have now occurred, a further trial will lead to any different situation than is going to exist on Monday when Lucy Letby is sentenced, because she will be receiving a number of life sentences, almost certainly a whole life sentence in relation to the length of those life sentences. And therefore, whether it's in the public interest to have further charges. And I think that's probably why the inquiry that the Department of Health has announced is so important.
But remind us the details of that inquiry.
Well, what the Department of Health have announced is that there's going to be what is known as a non-statutory inquiry into the events around this prosecution and leading up to the prosecution. Now, the significance with this, and it was interesting in what Holly was saying about how what the family want are answers. And answers clearly need to come from the management of the hospital, a large number of whom no longer work at the hospital, some of whom have retired now. Now, the point about a non-statutory inquiry is that there is no ability of that inquiry to compel witnesses to attend. And you could have a situation there where those who really need to answer questions about how it is that Lucy Letby was able to commit the crimes that she did within the processes that the hospital had, how that happened. This could be one of those situations, as we saw with the Post Office inquiry, which started also as a non-statutory inquiry, where it becomes a statutory inquiry because people need to attend to answer some very important questions. And that is the way in which the families are going to get, I think, the answers they're entitled to.
Joseph, listening to that, do you think families will get those answers? Because it looks like many other parties potentially facing very, very difficult questions now.
Absolutely, and I think Mr. Gilbert is absolutely correct when he says that it's wholly unlikely that the material quality of the sentence will in any way be changed. I also take the view that this is an inevitable whole life term. Life means life, but of course, criminal proceedings are not just about punishment in terms of years, but the process of truth being achieved. And this mechanism and this fashion for inquiries, especially the non-statutory form, which have weak powers, don't really have powers to be able to get what they want in terms of information, as to whether that is an appropriate safety valve in a situation like this, where we have a major scandal. I'd be very surprised if public perception wasn't such, or the public sentiment wasn't such, that this, as with many other such inquiries that begin on a more informal basis but end up being judge-led, because the scandal is too great. Yeah. We know, don't we, in the last few hours of the senior lead consultant, Dr. Stephen Breary, on that particular unit, who now can say, having held his tongue for fear of prejudicing proceedings, quite rightly, we need to know this was the right result and juries weren't influenced inappropriately. But he says that he raised these concerns before the final death. If that's the case, this cannot be dealt with informally. This is something the families either who haven't had satisfaction in respect of the convictions, and the prosecution, I expect, will proceed with retrial. Yeah. But they require and deserve a great deal more than this, because what they don't need is more of a sense of cover-up.
Joseph, Kotrie-Monson, thank you so much. And Paul Gilbert, really appreciate your time. We do know that the hospital have said significant changes have been put in place, but the questions are mounting. And as we heard from Holly earlier, a whistleblower saying, why is it that when concerns were raised by senior people within NHS management at the time, raised them, they weren't taken seriously?